Hi, I'm Rebekah Ricks, and I'm here with The Brew. The Brew is a mixture of people, events, or things that come together to form a more potent whole, and we want to make your whole a whole lot better. And today, I'm here with my yummy afternoon cup of coffee, and we're going to be talking about SAT specifics. So, really, what is the new SAT like, and what are the specific topics it covers, and how long they take and things like that. So first, let me take a good sip here, and then we'll get going and talking about that. So first thing is there is a new SAT. So in 2016, the SAT was rewritten, and before that, I have to say I was not a huge fan. If I could recommend which test to take, I would always say to take the ACT. And actually, for Florida, the ACT counts as the 10th grade FSA. So here in Florida, sometimes we lean more toward taking the ACT since it does count as part of our state testing requirements for public school if you're in public school. But as for the SAT, in 2016 they changed it, so there is it's called the new SAT, and it's very much more predictable. You can know exactly what subjects come in, amount of time, and number of questions you'll have, and you get to take 4 or 5 sections. And now the essay is optional. It used to be that you had to take the essay with the SAT, but now you do not have to. It is optional. So first, you have big chunks of time for the SAT. Rather, it used to be divided into a bunch of 10 shorter sections, but now it's just blocks of time. So the 4 sections are reading, writing and language, math with no calculator, math with calculator, and the optional essay. And now when you take the SAT, you get a 5-minute break after about every hour of testing. That means you'll get a break after the reading section and one more after the math no calculator section. And if you're taking the essay, you'll get one before you go on to the essay section. In addition to it being a predictable structure, it also becomes easier a lot of times for the math. For most people, the math has become a much easier one to do. So let's talk really fast about the reading structure. So it's the longest one on the SAT. It takes 65 minutes, and all the reading questions are passage-based. So you'll answer about 10 or 12 questions for each of the 5 passages. And there's a total of 52 questions. And that leaves you about a minute and 15 seconds per question. That includes reading time. So, and all the questions are multiple choice on the reading, so that makes it much easier. And of course, the subject matter is all predetermined. Everything is, you'll get one passage from U.S. or world literature. So usually it's a passage from something that you would read in American literature or English lit, something like that. You get 2 that deal with historical and social studies and 2 related to science. Kind of like you would get on the science section of the ACT. So 5 total reading sections, and one or more of these sections are going to have some sort of graphic, such as a table or graph, usually in the science sections, kind of like what you would get on the science section of the ACT. So they've kind of tried to mix that in there, mix all your science in with it. And in fact, the new thing with the SAT is you will get graphs in all 4 sections of the ACT. So they're big on making sure you can read graphs and decipher them in different ways. That's pretty much the biggest thing with the reading. The best way to beef up on your reading for the SAT is start reading classic works of literature, because there are at least 2 sections are going to be from some sort of work of literature. And fun fact, the number 1 work of literature that they usually choose from for some reason is the Scarlet Letter. So a lot of times, if you've read the Scarlet Letter, at least you'll have a reference. But I've seen doing practice tests, various different Dickens, Bronte. So anytime you can read a classic work of literature and work on answering questions from them, especially inference questions. So remember, A lot of times in private school, when you read a passage, we want you to write about and tell us what your opinion is on that. But when you're reading for your SAT and your ACT, we hate to say it, we don't care about your opinion. We want to know what the author's opinion is. So a lot of times that's the hardest type of questions in that reading section is what is the author's opinion of stuff? What is the point the author is trying to make? So just deeper inferring for when you're reading or when you're practicing for it, remember that. What is the author's purpose? What is the author's point of view? What is the author trying to put through? And sometimes students who haven't read a lot of harder literature have a hard time figuring that out. Now, the second section is the writing and language section. And it's about half as long as the reading section. It's only 35 minutes. It's technically called writing and language, but you'll probably hear it just shortened to writing. And all of its questions are passage-based. So for me personally, this is the trickiest section. You'll get 11 questions from each of the 4 passages, and that's a total of 44 questions on this writing and language section. It leaves you about 47 or 48 seconds to answer each question. And yay, all of them are multiple choice of A, B, C, and D. And some of them ask you questions about changing a word in a sentence. Many of them have the infamous no change. A lot of them have punctuation, verb tense, wordiness. So all your English grammar stuff is going to come in. And it could be almost anything. They're practically random. It can be anything in the English language, so sometimes it can be tricky. And I notice a lot of times kids have a really hard time on the punctuation. So the punctuation are the easy ones because the rules don't change. Sometimes grammar is a little harder because there's all those small rules, but always try to beef up on your punctuation rules so you don't miss that out. And the 4 passages are predetermined. One is on career, one is on social studies, one is on humanities, and one is on science. Unlike the reading section, you won't have any sections from prose or any sections from classic literature. All of the writing section, writing language are expository or argument-based or nonfiction narratives. So usually you won't have anything from a work of literature. But you will be asked data interpretation for graphs and tables and questions like that. And most of them, at least half of them will have some sort of graphic that you will have to, at least 2 of the 4 passages will have some sort of graphic that you'll have to discern from. So you'll read it and then there'll be a table or some sort of group of information that go with each other. So that's kind of the big thing with that. I always say just practice that one to see what type of questions they ask. A lot of times our biggest ones, because our spoken language is so different than our written language, most people really struggle with the verb tenses and the agreement and things like that. So that's kind of something to preface on. Now, one thing I really like that I have leaned toward really liking in the SAT when I used to not be a huge fan is the math with no calculator section. So it's just what it says. You're not allowed to use your calculator. And that's completely new. It's a 25-minute section, ask you about 20 questions. And of course, you can't use the calculator on any of them. 15 of these questions are multiple choice, and there are 5 grid-ins. So if you have a grid-in, I know, because the grid-ins ensue fear in everyone's hearts, so don't be too afraid of them. But 15 multiple choice and 5 grid-ins. And it's, or what they're officially known as student response. So you get 25 minutes. The no calculator section falls into 3 areas. So one's technically called Heart of Algebra or simple algebra stuff, advanced math, and additional topics. Everything you should be able to do, you should be able to do without a calculator. You won't find any problems with problem solving or data analysis. Everything is going to be more your basic math. So go back and brush up on your percents. Go back and brush up on on your percent problems, on your basic algebra. If you have become calculator dependent, this one is one you want to practice on, but it's all basic math, no calculator. And then there's math that you get to use the calculator on, okay? So math with a calculator. Sorry, one more. Okay, there we go. See, coffee's good for something. And so this is a 55-minute section. This is your another big, huge section that you don't necessarily, that you can use a calculator on, but you don't necessarily need to. They do want to test the math according to the College Board. They call it calculator fluency. So there's going to be some questions that you are going to have to plug in. There's a few logarithms. Now on this one, there's also 8 grid-in questions. So you're going to get 30 multiple choice and 8 grid-ins. So don't worry about them. It leaves you about 1 minute and 17 seconds per question. Compared to the ACT, it's about 1 minute, so they're almost exactly the same. So you got to be able to know what you're doing and keep on going. Now they do have grid-ins, and some of them are what are called extended thinking questions, which is a word problem or a graph that you have to decipher, things like that. And some people really, I always say don't take it cold turkey, go practice it a couple of times. If you're used to how they look, it's a little bit easier. And this section is going to be your very last on the SAT unless you're taking the essay, which is optional now. So if you're not a writer, you don't have to take it. And if you take the essay, then you get a 5-minute break now, and then you get to go take your essay. So the essay gives you 50 minutes to write your essay section, and you'll have to write something that's 650 to 750 words. You'll have to be given a thesis-driven statement. You'll have to analyze some sort of argument, which is entirely different than the old SAT and ACT. Like here's one that I read. Write an essay in which you explain how Paul Borgard built an argument to persuade his audience that natural darkness should be preserved. In your essay, analyze how Borgard uses one or more of the features and the directions that precedes the passage to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument. Excuse me. Be sure that your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage. So basically, you're going to be asked to read a passage, analyze it, and show the point of view they're asking for from points in the passage or other things you know. So remember, you're not supposed to say whether you do or don't agree with the passage. You have to come up with things that an objective breakdown of what their opinion is. So the big picture on the SAT is which sections are going to work for you. So I have a different philosophy on how to prep for the SAT than some people do. Some people like to take it and let's say they do horrible on their math section and then they want to do tutoring for their math section to pull that up. And that's great. Do that. But I say focus on your strengths. Go with the one that is the strongest. What does that mean? Okay, so I am a math person. I'm going to probably score highest on my math. Well, it's an average of the 4 sections. Well, in math, you have 2 sections. So work on your highest section to bring that score up. Okay, that's my biggest strategy. And I know a lot of people like to work on that low section to bring that up, and you do want to bring your low section up, but you can sometimes blow your low section out of the water if you work really hard on your high section and bring your high section even higher. So if you take it the first time cold turkey and haven't practiced at all, and you do great in English and low in math, I would say do 40% practice on math and 60% on that English, because the more you practice something, the better you're going to be at it. That's just human nature and natural. So let's talk really fast and I'll be done because I think my catching a cold here, I'm coughing a little bit. The SAT is scored. How is it scored? So the scoring is kind of funky on the SAT. The ACT is pretty straightforward, but the SAT is a little funky. It's on a score of 400 to 1600. And you'll get 2 section scores, okay? So you get one for the math and one for the English and the writing sections. And then those are put together, added together to get your total score. If you choose to take the essay doesn't necessarily won't go into your total score. You'll also be scored by 2 readers, and you'll get a score between 2 and 8 for the 3 areas: reading, analysis, and writing. And a perfect essay score would be an 8, 8, and 8. So you do get it scored, but it doesn't go towards your main ACT score. So if you're trying to get into a college that writing would matter, or into a program that would need a higher score, you can. So you'll also get test scores that show how you performed on each of the 4 sections individually. You'll get cross-test scores and sub-scores. The new scoring is kind of complicated, so when you get the sheet back, it will break down your skills. It'll show you how you did on questions. And now you can even, because I've had students that have this, you can even get a copy of the test you took, and you can see which answers you got wrong. Pretty cool, because then you can say, oh, I got this type of question wrong. I'm going to try that better next time. So this really, 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 if you're going to get a tutor, is really valuable for a tutor to look and say, oh, okay, your basic math, oh, look, you missed all these percent type questions. Or, oh, look, you can do logarithms really well. We don't need to go over that. Oh, but you don't remember how to do percents. We need to cover that. So now, one more thing about the scoring for the ACT is they use what's called rights-only scoring. In other words, you don't get any point deductions for wrong answers. You'll just get 1 point for every correct answer and no points for wrong or blank answers. So what does that mean? Okay, you're running out of time. You can guess. So here's my top tips really quick for the SAT. Practice timing. It's fast. You got to be able to go quickly. So make sure you can practice it timed. Decide if the essay is worth it, because it's not going to help boost your score at all. I kind of recommend that you don't take it unless you are just a phenomenal writer and you just like to do it. But taking the extra time to prep for the writing when you could be boosting another section sometimes isn't worth it. And then, use the scoring to your advantage. If you know that you're going to be slow on something, then guess on the rest. Another good strategy that I say is, if you have reading is a good example. If you know you're really good at reading, then go ahead and boost that reading section up as high as you can, and maybe just try to get 3 of the 4 done. Take a little more time and get them all right at the beginning. Things like that. So there's bunches of different strategies you can do, but those are kind of, in a nutshell, the specifics on the SAT, the new SAT, and what's kind of good and what's kind of bad and what's complicated, and how to kind of use it for your advantage. So hopefully you learned a little bit. It helped you a little bit in your future SAT taking. And if you have any questions, send me a message. I did have a very interesting SAT, ACT question. It was about a student asked me, I saw an email today about someone asked that they've had a student who's been out of high school for a couple of years and didn't take the SAT or ACT when they were in high school because they weren't planning on going to college. Now they're out of high school for a couple of years and they're planning on going to college. Do they need to take the ACT or SAT? The answer, because they're applying to, let's say, Polk State, and Polk State requires you to have an SAT or ACT score. Yes, you can still take it after you've graduated from high school. If you want a higher score you're trying to, you can take it at any time. And kind of a fun fact that you can take it after you've graduated from high school if you need to take it to get a higher score. So just FYI information for that one. So hopefully you guys have fun. It is Memorial Day. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm at home today, as you can tell, in my library/dining room, offering it. So hopefully you have a great Memorial Day. Enjoy time with family. We'll be back Friday morning with the brew and our extra shot of espresso. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you on Friday.